It all starts with the question, how the heck are we supposed to know what to believe when there's just so much information out there? My name's Peter, and this is Stacks and Facts. When I tell people about what it's like being a librarian, I like to say that it's not so different from when I was an intelligence analyst for the US Navy. Now, this may not feel super obvious at first, but the core of both jobs is to help people find and understand the information they need to make informed decisions. And that's it. Now, granted, in the Navy, I worked with intelligence, that is, information with military or strategic value, to help higher-ups make informed decisions, but y'all, my job wasn't to make those decisions. I was just helping them do that. As a librarian, I serve the public. You. I work with just about every form of information there is so that I can help patrons find the information they need to make informed decisions, but again, I'm not here to tell you what decisions to make. I'm just here to help you make them. So, given this, one might say that I have a keen interest in understanding and fighting misinformation and disinformation. It seems like every year they both get a little bit worse, and honestly, fighting them is a never-ending battle, but we still can do something about it, and that's why I'm here today. I want to help you understand three things: what misinformation and disinformation are, how they work, and what you can do about it. And now, before we get into misinformation and disinformation, we gotta have a working definition of information itself. And this actually isn't super easy for reasons that I go into in a different video. Have a look if it suits you. But for today's purposes, we can think of information like this. Information is an idea of something that starts in the mind that one person tries to send to another. And generally, we think of these ideas as having a measure of truth or accuracy. Not always, but we'll get into that into a minute, so just hold your horses. We may use things like writing and talking to share those ideas, but the writing itself isn't the information. It's more like a box that we use to hold it when we want to give it to someone else. And just like mail, sometimes messages get to the person in perfect shape, and sometimes you wonder just how many times it was dropped on its way before it got to you. There's a lot more to it than that, of course, and if you want to learn more about information broadly, come see me after class. Again, link. But this should be enough to get us started. Any questions? If so, leave them in the comments below. Now, let's talk about misinformation first. It's actually pretty simple. Misinformation is just information that's wrong or misleading, but not necessarily on purpose. An easy way to remember this is to think of another word that starts with mistake. When you mistake one thing for another, it might just be an accident. Sometimes capital I's just look like lowercase l's, and sometimes it's on purpose. For example, a certain news corporation's slogan was fair and balanced from 1996 all the way to 2017. Fair and balanced. Disinformation, on the other hand, is where things start to get a little intense. You'll see, it's a pun. Disinformation is also information that's wrong or misleading, but on purpose. So, whereas misinformation could be accidental, disinformation always intends to mislead. To help you remember, here's a fun little mnemonic that I came up with. Misinformation can be a mistake. Disinformation can be a disaster. Love it. It's pretty good. So, this intent that I keep mentioning behind disinformation, what is it? Well, there are a few examples that we see a lot. Above all, people use disinformation to mislead or to confuse. That means that there's some true thing out there that someone doesn't want you to know about or pay too much attention to, so they'll put an idea out there that contradicts the truth or hides it. Disinformation is also used to persuade. That is, someone's trying to get you to buy into their idea of what's true or right. Once they've persuaded you, you're less likely to question future information they send your way, and more likely to do something that they find favorable. That could be voting a certain way, buying a certain product, or supporting certain causes. We also see disinformation used to distract. So if everyone's so consumed with calling out something you've done that's obviously bad happening over here, they may be too distracted to see what you're doing over here. To quote, "Pay no attention to that man behind the curtain." Fourth, and related, emotion is a powerful tool. Getting people to feel big emotions makes them less likely to think critically about something. Telling people that their freedom is under attack, for example, will make them more receptive when you give them suggestions on how to protect it. Likewise, a feel-good story that seems like it could be true can make people feel like the source is more trustworthy. And finally, disinformation divides. Lately, political divisions seem to have gotten real bad, y'all. Like, to the point where sometimes it seems like the people we're talking to live in a completely separate reality from us. That's not an accident, and it's used in two ways. First, convincing people that they have an enemy in another group of people can stir up a sense of community around a cause, specifically fighting that enemy. It also makes them less receptive to what the other side has to say, thus giving you more control over them. And second, divide and conquer's real, y'all. We know that other governments spread disinformation on social media to divide Americans because the US does a lot in a lot of places, and a lot of people don't like that. The more that Americans are at each other's throats, though, the less that they're aware of and involved in global affairs. So when we talk about how disinformation has intent, that's what we mean. Now, what do we do about it? Lucky for us, once you know what goes into disinformation, you know what to look for, which is the first step in fighting it. So when you find something suspicious, here are some questions to keep in mind. First, how does what you're reading or seeing make you feel? If you start feeling riled up because of the language or the imagery it uses, ask yourself, does a reliable source of information really need to make you angry to get its point across? Second, where did you hear it from? I mean this in the kindest way, but Aunt Judy or Steve from work probably didn't do any research before they shared that meme. If they did, they might realize that it's not true, and what they just shared began its life on a now deleted account. That account, in turn, was probably deleted because it was fake. Third, who said it originally? We may feel inclined to trust statistics if they come with a source, but there are two things to be careful with here. First, is that the actual source, or did someone just put the name on it? Second, is the organization itself what it claims to be? Here's one of the best examples I know. So the American Academy of Pediatrics is the actual professional organization focused on pediatric health in the US. It has 67,000 members and has existed since 1930. The American College of Pediatricians, on the other hand, has only been around since 2002, has approximately 500 members, and pushes anti-LGBT and non-scientific stances and quote-unquote treatments that are widely recognized as harmful and actually illegal in many places. Now, I'm not saying that one is trying to impersonate the other, or ride on their coattails, or ascribe some other intent, but I'm not saying that. So, do with that what you will. Fourth, regardless of where the information is coming from, it never hurts to ask, what's the agenda behind this? So if a social media CEO goes to Congress and says, oh yeah, privacy matters, there's definitely a problem, and we welcome more regulation, while then quietly giving money to the politicians who already believe government is too big, what do we do with that? Finally, ask yourself this. What's not being talked about? The most effective disinformation isn't all just made up, it's actually mostly true, but it's rarely the whole picture. It'll only present the facts that support a particular viewpoint, and again, to make you feel a particular way. The goal is that their targets, you and me, will just take it at face value or just do enough digging to verify that the statements are true. And since strong emotions help root ideas in our brains, these become harder for people to overcome later, even when they're revealed as misleading or manipulative. So, now that you know what to look for, you can do something about it, and sometimes the easiest thing to do is nothing. The buck can stop here with you. Whether it's a meme or a rumor or something interesting you heard from a friend, you don't have to pass it on. One and done, y'all. If you want to take a more active role, though, sometimes the best way to deal with misinformation that others believe is to have just an honest-to-goodness conversation with the people that you know. We all kind of expect at this point that talking to strangers online about controversial topics will go south real quick, and I don't really recommend doing that at all, frankly. But in person or over Zoom or on the phone, maybe Aunt Judy's more receptive. And like TBH, maybe she's really suffering from social isolation, which incidentally, we know makes people more susceptible to misinformation. So reach out and focus on the people that you know and who you're invested in. If you do this, though, remember, the person you're talking to isn't the problem. It's their beliefs. And they hold those beliefs in part because they've been the target of billion-dollar disinformation campaigns. It takes patience, and you probably won't see results immediately. You definitely won't. And you may have to walk away from the conversation several times for your own sake. But do your best not to accuse. Instead, ask open-ended questions. Why do you think XYZ? How did you learn about that? What's your personal experience with this subject been? And how do you think XYZ person feels? The goal here is to get people to think more in depth about things that perhaps they've only taken for granted up until now, which can be really uncomfortable. After all, nobody likes being wrong, right? and it can be really hard to admit to that. But it is what it is. My final piece of advice is this: just be curious. Yeah, the world's big and scary, sure, but also it's super interesting. And when you get into the habit of asking why things are the way they are, you'll start to have a better understanding of how things work, and you'll just have an easier time doing, well, just about everything. And when you get to a question that you don't know how to answer, call now. Trained librarians are standing by to take your call. We're not here to tell you what decisions to make. We're just here to help you make them. But, enough from me. What's your experience been like with misinformation? Has there ever been anything that you just knew was true, only to find out that actually it definitely wasn't, and now you're super embarrassed from that conversation you had, and you can never go back to that Starbucks on West Broadway again? Not that you think Janet's going to judge you, but she should, and she probably is. And I'm kind of projecting my own experience here, aren't I? Yeah. Let me know in the comments below if you have had a similar experience. Subscribe if you haven't, but you want to. Thanks for watching. And until next time, don't forget to ask questions. All right. Bye.